everybody, it's Jimmy back in the shop this morning, and recently I've done a number of videos on wood turning, and I hope you've enjoyed those videos. I've done a number of projects here recently. I post my YouTube videos on social media, and one of the questions that I've gotten is about the lathe itself. Hey, what kind of lathe is that you're using? And so I have gotten into some dialogue with certain people, and I thought, you know what, I think I'll just do a video on this thing. What I've got here is a Ridgid lathe. It's probably one of the least expensive lathes that you can buy. I got this one on Craigslist in the box, new. It was never been built. Paid 150 bucks for it. I think they retailed for about 300 plus or minus. Although when I looked recently, I couldn't find that they're being retailed anymore, so this may be a discontinued lathe. But this is called a bar style lathe. It does not have a cast iron bed to it, and so there are some shortcomings with that. But there's pluses and minuses to this lathe, and I thought I would just kind of walk you through it from one end to the other and give you my thoughts on this. To start with, this is a 3/4 inch 16 thread per inch spindle, and what you'll find with this is that there's some, you can get accessories for it, but the more common size is 1 inch 8 thread per inch. So when you go accessorize this thing, like this is a Nova G3 chuck here, this is a 1 inch 8 thread per inch chuck here, and this little black piece right here that's installed is an adapter. And so this will go onto the 16 thread per inch and basically allow your chuck to be used on that spindle. Now this thing, no matter where you go or how you shop, you're going to pay about 18 to 20 bucks for this. So I went ahead and bought it. And it needs to be installed with the accessory or the chuck. So this one is installed on this chuck. I don't take it off of here. If I get other chucks, I'll have to buy other adapters. So there's a little expense there, to adapt this to the more common world of the 1 inch spindle. This has a pressed steel base, so it's a pretty lightweight machine, and so you have to be real careful with the balance of the equipment that you put on here. I challenged this thing with a long 4x4 piece that I needed to turn for a carousel horse stand. And I did my best to center the thing, but when I turned the lathe on, it shook around pretty good, and it actually threw the post off. Fortunately, I was standing off to the side, and it didn't hurt me or anything, but just kind of put the scare into me. I ultimately did get it centered up and get it turning, but you got to be real careful with this machine. The larger cast iron machines are much heavier, and they can tolerate a little more imbalance than this one. A few comments on the drive unit here. You've got a 1/2 horsepower motor, and that transmits power to the spindle via a pulley system here. So you have 4 adjustments that you can make. On the outside cover, it shows you what the speeds are. But I've found over time I know exactly which pulley I need to be on based on the type of work I'm doing. So to change the speed on the lathe, you just need to get the belt onto a different set of pulleys. Now, right now, this is the motor side, it's the large pulley, and it drives the small spindle. So this is the fastest speed here. So say I want to slow it down. What I do is I just take the belt and grab it and move it back a little bit, and I just put it on the next pulley, and then I just come over here and I just roll it over onto the other side, and boom, it's done. So it only takes just a few seconds. So the drive pulley system has this cover on it that opens up and closes, and it closes down on this little threaded connection here. And the lathe came with a little knob that you keep tight. And I'll tell you what, that thing is a big pain in the behind to take off and put on. So I took the thing off and I threw it in a junk drawer, and I've never seen the need to have it since. So if I need to adjust this thing, it's not a big deal. I just come over here and lift it up, do what I'm going to do, and it just stays down by gravity. So here's a spur drive that's installed into the spindle here. There's a Morse taper there that keeps it in there. Now, you'll use this kind of a drive for turning spindles and so forth, but if you want to change that out and go to your a G3 chuck, for example, this thing has to be popped out of here. So there is a hole in the shank of this thing, and I suppose you could take a screwdriver or something and pop that out of there, but I never like to do that because I feel like I'm boogering up my threads. And once you booger up this spindle, it's all over with the lathe. So what I do is I use a steel rod and I go through the spindle to drive this thing out. Okay, so you can go. Okay, now to pop the spur drive out of there, I just put this little piece of steel through the spindle, and I've just got a piece of wood and I just tap it, and it'll knock this thing right out of here. And so I'll just set that to the side, and I can put on my other chuck and go to work. Now, one of the things that annoyed me about this design, you know, other than having to take that knob off and on to open this thing, was that I could not put this through the center of the spindle without opening the cover. So you had to take the knob loose and then pick it up and then put this thing through here and then drive it out. So just a tip, this is something I did. I just took a hole saw and I just took it and I drilled about a 1.5 inch hole. And that way I can drive out my spur gear or whatever's in there, Jacob's chuck, what have you. I can drive it, whoops, take my little block of wood and just tap, tap, and comes right out. And so that has been a big time saver for me. The tailstock also has a spindle that's hollow, and this has a Jacob's chuck on a Morse taper that's wedged in. So to get that out of there, what I do is I take my little steel rod that I keep here at the lathe. By the way, this did not come with the lathe, so this is something that you'll have to just get. So I just put my little steel rod in there, and I just take my piece of wood and tap, tap, and it pops it right out of there. Quite frequently, I'll use my Forstner bits here to hollow objects out, and so I just wanted to show a point on that. I'll put the Forstner bit into a Jacob's chuck here, and this one's loose, it's not tight, but I'll just take it and I just pop it in here and get a good seat on it, and then I'll use it to hollow out objects. And so with this design, you need to turn this orange knob here to advance the Forstner bit. And you know, I'm kind of a big guy, but when you're doing this with 5 or 6 different Forstner bits, it takes maybe 30-40 minutes. It's really kind of fatiguing to do this, and my fingers and my wrists kind of get sore from doing it. So one of the shortcomings of this design is that it does not have the crank that a lot of the nicer lathes have. So it's a downside. I work around it. It's not a big problem for me. But a lot of times what I'll do is if the wood's soft enough and the bit's sharp enough, I'll just leave the tailstock loose and I'll just kind of push it in there, especially if I've got just a drill bit or something, and I don't even bother with this crank here. Here's a look at the back of the tailstock, and there's an adjustment screw here, and that'll adjust the amount of slop that the tailstock has on this key that's on the bottom of the bar. So this thing will get loose from time to time. I've tightened it up a couple of times, but I haven't found it to be that big of an issue really. This thing right now, it has about an 1/8 of an inch worth of slop on the, well, much more than that. But I know that if I just push it to this position and then lock it, that's pretty well lined up. The design of the dogs on this is not really awesome. I mean, it works just fine, but these are kind of awkward to use. This cast metal piece has I guess a female to a nut head, and so these hang loose here until you engage them with the nut, and then you can move it. And what I found is that especially when you're in the middle of turning something and you need to make a small adjustment, sometimes it's a headache to get this thing engaged properly, and you'll fumble with it a good deal, and then the fastener will get loose, and then you have to go like, you kind of have to ratchet to get it tight again, and it'll make you cuss just a little bit. So I think this is probably one of the more rinky-dink aspects of the design here. I like to move my machine around, take it outside when I'm doing something that's real chip intensive here. So I put some wheels on this thing and on the back side of it, and it does not have wheels on the head side. But I did put these handles on the side of it so I can pick it up and move it around like a wheelbarrow. So I'll open my big door up from time to time and I'll roll this thing out there if I'm doing a real messy job. And so that's kind of a handy thing. One thing I do like about this machine is it's got this wooden base to it. A lot of the cast iron lathes just have the rails. And so this surface, you have a place to put your tools and so forth when you're working. That's kind of nice. And then I put a bunch of cup hooks into the side of this thing, and that's where I hang my knives here. And I've got pretty much all the pieces that I use on this thing are hung off of the machine itself, and that way I don't have to take up valuable wall space. I drilled all these holes along here, and it's just to have a place to put some of the tools while you're not using them here. So there's a live center, and there's a depth gauge. There's my Jacob's chuck. And so if you lay everything down flat on here, everything gets all covered with chips and you can't find anything. But if you keep stuff in the holes here, it's a little easier to find things in the heat of the battle. Well, that's all I can think of to tell you about this machine. If you have any questions or comments, be sure and add them below. And review the comments. If there's something that you know about this machine that you can help me reply to another viewer, that'd be very helpful. In the meantime, that's all I've got, and thank you for watching, and I hope you'll push the like button and consider becoming a subscriber to the Stuart Arch channel. You have a great day.